Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, and I want to touch on last night's MLB Home Run Derby that took place we had some other all-star festivities over the weekend with some of the, prospect events, the skills competition, the futures game, and all of that, but, eyes really turned to the all-star break last night with the Home Run Derby. And I think that it's solidified that it is by far the best all-star event in American sports. There are just not really many competitors, to be honest with them. The dunk contest is something that should be on par with the Home Run Derby, in my opinion. That is for the NBA. But the dunk contest has just seen a number of different issues that have popped up over the years. One of them being the lack of star power in the dunk contest, and Jaylen Brown even participated this year, and everybody was upset with the fact that what the performance he gave them and such. So that is something that hasn't been great for them, that there hasn't been star power in the dunk contest, but also the fact that there is this idea or this excitement that we're going to see something we never have before in the dunk contest. And at this point, we've just seen so many different varieties of dunks that it can be watered down for us a little bit. The Home Run Derby, you know what you're getting. You are getting professional athletes just destroying baseballs on a regular basis. And I don't know. I feel like because of the fact that the expectations are so much more realistic and down to earth, that it ends up coming away as long as there is a good, competitive finish to it, that the event ends up being memorable. And I do think that this is going to be a memorable one. Now, to some degree as well, the MLB was having troubles just like the NBA in terms of star power, not necessarily being quite as interested in participating in the events. But I still feel like the overall pool that they got together was good enough, and you got a key star in Bobby Witt Jr., who was able to give a big-time performance for them, and he ends up going to the finals against Teoscar Hernandez. It comes down to literally the last ball between the two of them, and Teoscar Hernandez, also somebody that I feel like has been largely underrated for the past few years. Now, I know he got an all-star appearance in 21 or 22, so it's not like Teoscar Hernandez hasn't gotten his dues by any means, but he is, I just feel like, one of the easiest players to root for in the MLB, and I'm glad that he's getting this chance with the Dodgers to have some more eyes on him and showing the type of impact that he has on baseball teams, because, again, I'm just a very big fan of his game. And having him and Bobby Witt Jr., this young star, where you talk about the MLB having issues sometimes in terms of marketability for their young players, Home Run Derby is the perfect opportunity to do so. Fortunately, we didn't get the performance we were hoping from Gunnar Henderson. I had expectations for him in this event as well, but that didn't end up coming to fruition. But again, like I mentioned, ended up being a very close finals between Teoscar Hernandez and Bobby Witt Jr. Hernandez hit 14, Bobby Witt Jr. with 13 in the final round. He had 2 outs remaining. It seemed like he was going to be able to tie up Teoscar, but that final pitch came just short of the wall in deep center, and Teoscar ended up taking it home, being the first ever Dodger in franchise history to win the Home Run Derby, which was a little bit surprising. And we have a comment from Anthony Manzano. You had a couple of guys in that competition that are not natural home run hitters. They're more average and slap hitters. I would agree with that, and I think that you can throw Bobby Witt Jr. into that conversation as well, where Bobby, I got to double check his stats. The last time I looked, he was at 15 home runs with a couple days left into the All-Star break. But you look at the average exit velocity on his swings. I mean, he smacks the ball, absolutely, but isn't somebody you necessarily look at as somebody who will perennially hit 30 plus home runs, and maybe that does end up being the case. Maybe I'm selling him a little bit short on that one, but was able to perform. Alec Bohm is another example. I was incredibly surprised with the performance that he was able to put out there. Ended up going to a shootout against Teoscar Hernandez in that semifinals. That it was really fun to see Bohm as well, who I think is another one of these likable players. Not quite, I don't know if I'd call him a rising star. I believe he's 28 years old, so he's definitely still improving, and he's on one of the premier franchises in the MLB, so that was a little bit of a good marketing thing there. Last couple notes is Pete Alonso. Pretty disappointing, and that's where you get the natural home run hitters, and Pete Alonso just wasn't able to really compete this season, or at least in the home run derby. Hit just 12 home runs. He was the first player to be eliminated. 12 ended up being the least amount by any player in the home run derby. Anthony with some stats here. Gunnar, Bobby, and Alec are maybe at best 20 to 25 homer guys a season. I mean, Gunnar is already, I'm pretty sure, at 28 home runs. So I'm not ready to put a cap on what Gunnar Henderson can do. But no, absolutely. It's not necessarily the aesthetic of expecting, the usual guys, and Adolis Garcia is kind of in that conversation, but he's just having a down year anyways, which doesn't help him and Pete Alonso. And Jose Ramirez, who's having a great season, but that's 2 straight pretty underwhelming home run derby appearances. I can't imagine that we are going to see him again. Now, J-Ram did make it to the second round, but ultimately did fall short in that one to Bobby Witt Jr. But overall here, last thoughts on the home run derby before we'll get into a little bit of draft thoughts, because I actually haven't touched on that just yet. But I think I have to at least mention the national anthem, that I don't want to make quite as big of a joke about it, because this morning we did just get an update from, if for those of you who didn't see, the national anthem was kind of a travesty in terms of the performance from this woman, Ingrid Andress, who is a country singer, and she went out there and it was really, really bad. One of the worst ones that I have ever seen. It gave, Fergie vibes from the NBA All-Star game all those years ago, where there were MLB players that looked like they were sort of holding back their laughs. It was just a really bad moment. And, this morning she posted on her Instagram that she was drunk and that she's checking herself into rehab. So again, I understand it was a horrendous moment on national TV, and you have to have sympathy for, what's going on there. But it was definitely a memorable moment from these All-Star festivities, and, we're hoping for the best for her, because obviously, if she's going to rehab and she's dealing with some stuff, that we want to be sensitive there. But I did think that it was worth at least mentioning there. But as for Anthony has been asking some questions about the 2025 MLB Draft and the prospects. It's, I followed along with the draft. I would be, lying to you if I said I was experts on a number of these different players. Mentions the Marlins. They took PJ Morlando, who was one of the few high school picks in the draft. They ended up taking him 16th overall. This was a draft that was more so dominated by a lot of college hitters, even more so than the overall situation. There were far more hitters in the college baseball world than we are typically used to. It is kind of interesting when you do look at what the trajectory of the MLB draft could look like now that we are in this era of the NIL. I know this is going kind of, tangent off of your question, Anthony, but, I can't say I know too much about the high school prospects in this draft. It definitely did steer more so towards the college game, which would be interesting because college baseball is a it seems like another developing sort of interest in America in terms of sports, and I think it's because we're getting a little bit more star power at the college level that they're trying to go out and get paid. And again, we're talking about a 1-year sample size here in terms of this being the case, but you go back to last year as well, you see Skeens and Cruz and Wyatt Langford and those names that were at the top of last year's draft as well, all being actual big name college players. I don't know if that was necessarily the same exact case with this past year. Jack Caglianone was the biggest, I would say, college star that was available. He ended up falling to 6th in this year's draft. He went to the Kansas City Royals in what was a pretty good pickup there. I'm all for, a Royals franchise that has been, you could say up and coming. I mean, not really, because the future did not seem all that bright last year up until when they signed Bobby Witt Jr. to that massive contract extension, and you were hoping that they were going to be able to surround him with equal talent, and hopefully Caglianone can play into some sort of a role similar there. But again, I don't necessarily have all too much to say about the MLB Draft. Again, I'm still sort of working my way into the research behind it. Gotta say, I am a Red Sox fan, so I was pretty happy with how they came away with Braden Montgomery, who, at least in terms of projections of where he was going to land going into the draft, fell all the way to 12th. And this is the second straight year for the Red Sox where they got one of the more notable college players. Last year it was Kyle Teal, who was playing catcher at Virginia, and he ended up being at least seen as a steal. He's been doing very well in minor leagues up to this point in the year as well. So ultimately, I think that I can't complain there all too much. But definitely let me know what your thoughts on the MLB Draft are, and if you want me to go into a little bit more of a prepared deep dive into it. We are at this little bit of a middle ground in the sports calendar, so I would absolutely be interested in, diving into it if it's something that you viewers would be into. But that is all the time we have for on this segment. We're going to be taking our final break, and when we come back on the other end, we are going to be talking about the report that came out yesterday as to what a trade package would look like for Lauri Markkanen from the Golden State Warriors, and just talking about whether or not there is any chance that the Warriors can make this type of a splash move this far into the summer that would put them in championship contention next year. So we're going to be diving into all of that, but first, our final break here. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.